I pledge
pledge
allegiance
allegiance to the
to the
flag
flag of the
of the United
United
States
States
of
of America
America
and to the republic
for
for
which
which
it
it stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The school board workshop is intended for discussion purposes only. No board action will be taken. Public participation can either be through public comments, through the question and answer, through Zoom, or by sending an email to Ellsworth School Board Vice Chair Paul Marcosian at pmarcosian@ellsworthschools.org. Those submitting questions are asked to provide their full name. And first item on the agenda is the review and the discussion of the draft remote learning plans for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year. The board is considering the general remote learning plan for the balance of the year as developed by our professional administrators and staff. A formal vote will be taken on the plan at the April 28th board meeting. Questions specific to a student's grades, class activities, etc., should be posed to the respective teachers or administrators at another time, not during this meeting. So,
Mrs. Thomas, could I just give a quick intro and then I'd like to turn it over to the administrators? But first, just to offer praise for our administrators and our staff for all the work that they have done, not just in developing and administering the remote learning program, but for the amount of work that went into the drafting and revision of the document that was sent to you folks. A significant amount of time and contributions from all of our staff, and would like to give our curriculum director, Rachel Corman Ramos, credit for taking all the input from all of our staff and combining it into one document, one voice that was ready to be submitted to you folks. Now, I think it would be beneficial because you've all had a chance to look at it and read through it. But for the members of the viewing public, I think it would be good if each of our administrators would take maybe 5 to 7 minutes to walk through the plan from the perspective of their building or department, if that would be okay with the board.
It's fine with me.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
fine, yes.
Thank you. So I think what we would do is, why don't we start with Ellsworth High School, then HCTC, then Adult Ed, then EEMS, and then EES. And Curriculum Director Ramos is available also to answer and provide additional input. So I will mute and turn it over to you, Mr. Clifford. Go ahead.
Okay. So, you know, when we left school 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago now, you know, the biggest thing that we're worried about is dealing with the students that may not have technology, may not have internet use, you know, how we're going to deal with those kids. And when we were thinking about grading, we were being cautious, you know, of all of our kids, and we wanted to be fair to them. And so what we've done is any student that hasn't passed in any work, usually in jump rope, if you put an M in, it's for missing, then it counts as a 0. We haven't done that because we didn't feel that it was fair to hurt students' grades, just because of the situation that we were in, because it's an emergency right now. What we have found is that some students aren't doing work and they're checking their grades on jump rope, and parents are probably checking grades also like they usually do, and their grades aren't moving because we don't have those M's in there. So a student could have about a 3.2, 3.4 for the last month and may not have done any work. And so their grade really isn't accurate right now. So we're looking to, you know, start adding M's next week so that it is more accurate. An M, if you go 0 through 100, it's equivalent to a 55. Jump rope made it that way. It's not equivalent to a 0. So it'll affect the grade a little bit, but not like a 0 would. And we think that's important so that the student knows exactly what they're getting for a grade and the parents know exactly what they're getting for a grade. So at the end of the fourth quarter, there are no surprises. The second part is, the grading, and I've seen a lot of high schools go to pass fail and talk to a lot of principals as to why that is. We're going to keep the grading as is, like we always have. And I think we're a little bit different than other high schools in that, our grade at the end of the year is from a continuum from September until June. So we don't have the first quarter and then grades cut off and you start over the second quarter. Grades are followed throughout the year. And I think most schools have that cutoff after each quarter. And if we did have that cutoff, we would seriously consider pass fail, but we don't. And so if we did go pass fail for the fourth quarter, that would mean that the grade point averages through the third quarter, that's what would count on transcripts and GPAs. And we didn't think that that was fair to the kids. So we're going to continue grading like we usually do, 1 through 4 scale. And at the end of the year, they'll get the 1 through 4 scale grade and the 0 through 100 grade scale. So it'll be consistent on the transcript, and we think that's fair. There's a lot of kids that are home right now working very hard, getting their grades up, and I think in our situation, a pass fail wouldn't be really fair to them. Any questions on any of that about the missing or the 0 through 100 or 1 through 4 scale?
Mr. Clifford,
Yeah.
could you also talk a little bit about the expectations of students during the day, the amount of time during the day, what's expected in terms of interaction with teachers and so forth?
Yeah, so, that was another thing that we've been gauging. I think we're better at it now, than we were the first week. Feedback from some parents and students is that there's a lot of work that's being given to them, and they were spending a lot of hours. To parents, if your student could, concentrate for 2 to 3 hours and get some work done, that's what we're asking. That should be about right for a high school student. So whether they do it in the morning or afternoon or when they meet with their regular class, that should count. But about 2 to 3 hours a day, and they should be able to keep up with their workload.
And Dan, also a little bit about the types of supports that you have in place for your students, your risk review team and the teams of teachers and so forth.
Yeah, so we still have our teaming and our risk review team, keeping an eye, and we have this Google Doc that we fill out weekly on how our students are doing. And we made a school-wide Google Doc so all the teachers can see how each student is doing. And the supports that I think that a lot of teachers are doing now is they could be a regular Zoom session, but they're also holding office hours for kids that need extra time or extra work. Sometimes they go from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and a student may not use them ever, but a student may Zoom in with them and go over a couple problems or ask some questions of the teacher. So it's a little more one-on-one or small group time, and those have been successful also. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you very much. Mrs. Bowles? Oops.
Good evening, everyone. To talk a little bit about HCTC, I think first what I'd like to talk about is the social, emotional, and academic supports that are in place. For HCTC, we're doing a few different things. We're meeting weekly as a staff to talk about Jeopardy Kids, and we also, like the high school, have a Google Doc that Mrs. High and I share to kind of keep track of kids. Once a week, Mrs. High is Zooming virtually with all of our area high school guidance counselors. And our area high school principals are meeting on Tuesday after vacation. So we're in constant collaboration with our sending schools. So if a student is struggling socially and emotionally, Mrs. High can address it with the sending school guidance counselor in addition to me with the principals, which I think has been really essential for us during this time. In terms of academic support, my staff is also doing office hours. Staff typically have office hours twice a week, which are once in the morning and once in the afternoon, so that depending on student schedules, they can access the teacher 2 different times of the day. We had a little bit of struggle in the beginning scheduling our actual classes because every high school did kind of something a little bit different in terms of how they were offering their classes virtually. So once that kind of evened out for us, our classes are going live twice a week virtually for staff. And then students have the option to either talk to their teachers during those office hours for support, or staff has done a lot of individual one-on-one sessions with kids virtually when it's more convenient for them if the office hours don't work. For us, we're doing the same thing as the high school. I think it's important to remember that Ellsworth High School sends us the largest population. So it was important to us that Dan Clifford and I are kind of in sync grading wise. And every high school in Hancock County is doing grading a little bit differently. So for me, I needed to be able to have a consistent reporting system that every high school could then translate into whatever system they're using. So for us, our report card and our grading and reporting is going to look the same as Ellsworth High School, where we will continue to provide timely feedback to students on their work so that it's recorded in Jump Rope, and students can still, and teachers can that way communicate with families via Jump Rope, and parents can run the missing report that's there. And then it's more accurate description for families of what work students are missing. Like Dan said, we're going to have the same system. So instead of that M equating to a 0, it'll now be the 1 instead, which allows for opportunities for growth so that students don't feel completely deflated during this time. And one of the things we've talked a lot about is if students are communicating with staff and they have extenuating circumstances, we're going to work with that child to help provide additional opportunities for support so that they can get what they need. For us, then at the end of the year, we're going to do what we always do, which is send our reports to the high schools, and then every high school can take that grade and convert it into their system so that students within each high school are treated equitably within their high school system as well as with us. Are there any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Marcosian, have we had any questions? Apparently. Okay. Next is, I think, Ms. Sargent?
Mrs. Sargent, Adult Ed.
Sorry about that, I was on mute. As always, learning activities in adult education and the time commitment are set by learners in partnership with teachers, so that hasn't changed. And obviously our sensitivity to the heightened social, economic, emotional, and logistical challenges that our adult learners face, who are in many cases parents of the kids who are going to the schools we're talking about tonight, we keep in mind. We use a lot of the same systems as the schools for supporting our learners. We communicate regularly with them. We provide one-to-one tutoring as needed. And we collaborate a lot with community agencies who provide case management and support. And we've continued we have a weekly, we call it a case management meeting. It's not technically that, but a case conferencing meeting on a weekly basis. And we've continued to do that, reviewing students who need support. We have always had an ongoing Google Doc listing our students who are struggling, or all of our students, and we troubleshoot with those individuals. Regarding grading, adult ed has never had traditional grading. The grading or the assessment is geared toward the specific activities and goals of a particular learner. So for example, we use a pretest for the HiSET, and we use the HiSET official test as the summative evaluation, or it's the AccuPlacer pre and post for somebody going on to college. So that sort of wraps it up. I don't know if anybody has any questions for me.
Thank you. Any questions? Nope. And next, Mr. Higgins, you listed an order.
Ms. Gabinelli.
Okay. Ms. Gabinelli.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all. I first want to start out by talking and giving a little bit of a shout out to our teachers who have been working really diligently on this plan and connecting with families and students on a daily basis. So I'm going to start by talking about communication and the communication that we've been doing and will continue to do. We are communicating with students and families via email, Google Classroom, Zoom, Google Meets on a daily and weekly basis. And we are offering a variety of learning activities and lessons on those platforms. And we are suggesting that for 5th grade, there should be time spent on academics should be between 90 and 120 minutes a day. And for 6th through 8th graders, we're looking at 120 minutes to 150 minutes daily, which is the suggested time frame that we've offered to families that teachers are really trying to abide by. And through these platforms that we're using, students are able to submit work back to teachers. There are teachers that are through Google Classroom, they're able to submit it that way. They're able to submit work through email, and some students or some teachers are also doing e-portfolios, using e-portfolios for kids as well, so they can submit their work that way. So there's a variety of options and choices for kids as they maneuver through this remote learning experience. We know that the circumstances for each child are going to vary greatly during this process, and we really are concerned about the equity and the access issues. So while we take that in consideration, we wanted to take that in consideration when we were grading as well. So what we are going to do is when students submit work to teachers or submit an assessment to teachers, teachers will provide them with feedback or a grade, just as we normally would if we were in the classroom. But the difference is at the end of the 3rd trimester, instead of reporting out in proficiency grades, we are going to report, give parents and students a narrative report based on the work that they submit to teachers. So that narrative report will be individualized to each student, and it will be based only on the work that they've been able to submit during this time. We felt that that would really address the access issue and the equity issue and not harm students in terms of giving them grades. So that is what we are prepared to do upon board approval of our plan. In terms of support for, one other thing that I would like to mention too, I know that there's been some concern about retention. And in the plan, we explicitly talk about the fact that if retention wasn't part of a conversation with families prior to closure, it is not anticipated. So just to kind of allow families to take a deep breath and relax a little bit in terms of that. If we hadn't been talking about that prior to closing, that's not something that we anticipate happening. In terms of support for students and families, teachers are working to offer interventions during their class time on the Zoom and Google Meets lessons. They're also offering office hours after to provide individual support to students and making sure that everybody has their needs met in terms of that. I have been also meeting individually with parents and students if they are struggling or feeling overwhelmed. We're working on coming up with plans. Our guidance department is offering that social emotional support for students and families, and they have just recently sent out a letter as to how to access that support. And food services offering help, thank you to Mr. Daly, for families with the breakfast lunch program, which I'm sure Mr. Higgins will talk more about, as well as the donated food delivery program. And then any additional support can be accessed through contacting myself or teachers directly, and we will help in any way we possibly can. And I think I covered it. Does anyone have any questions? Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Lewis?
I need to answer that phone.
I'm
Oh my gosh. Well, I think Miss Gabby and I very nicely stated so much. We've worked closely together on this part of the plan. You know, we started off the year talking about kindness, and whoever knew that kindness and empathy and compassion were going to be the greatest of factors that we needed to consider as things evolved. You know, we all started K-8 by finding out about the school closure and trying to make kids as comfortable as possible with the potential transitions, because we felt that was critical to their social emotional development. We started with passing out packets that had 2 weeks worth of review and enhancement materials. We made sure that those parents who were not able to pick them up were able to receive them as food deliveries were made or as special trips were made. I want to thank all the teachers for the hard work, not just them, but as we continue. But I also want to thank the parents. Change is hard for any of us, but change under these circumstances where there's unpredictability, break in routine, and sometimes multiple challenges all at the same time for parents. Those have been things that parents have called about or emailed about, and God bless them for doing that. It's been really helpful to know where the questions are and how we can try to help. Equity, as Erica said, equity and fairness and access are issues that we are concerned with every single day. And as I hear from parents, I had one wonderful mom call and say, Kathy, it's great you guys are going to pass out the devices, but I don't have internet on my street. I said, okay, that's a different kind of problem. I did not know that was a possibility. So our wonderful IT department is looking into that. We have some people at City Hall that are also concerned about that. And it's been absolutely a good question. And we need to investigate and do what we can. What we really want, the purpose of providing remote learning, is to maintain learning and the pattern of learning for our kids. We know that's hard. We have working parents. We have parents who are working from home and need the internet. Now that all of our kiddos have had the opportunity to have their devices, and some parents have chosen not to bring those home because they think they can handle it otherwise. And again, some parents don't have the availability of the usage of those devices yet. But what we're hoping for is we can get ourselves and kids into that routine and predictability of what's coming next. Our K-4 teachers have met, and we've talked about the grading system. And the grading is very challenging for kids at these ages. The developmentally, when they have other things on their mind, they're not focused. And what we are hoping is that everyone will realize that for this particular level, grading is not appropriate. However, because we want them to stay in the pattern of learning and stay in the routine of new information, unlike those first 2 weeks, the next batch of work, if you would call it that, that went out and that is being done on devices is new information. We're picking up where trimesters 1 and 2 left off, because we do have indications from there. And as Erica said, if we had kiddos who were struggling, we have had conversations for the most part, or it has come up in discussion, that that child might need to be retained. But their work going forward will not determine a retention, and we need to be really clear about that. We are offering every opportunity for learning. I have teachers, especially fourth grade teachers, who've actually set up classrooms in their homes. They have whiteboards, they have everything that they would have had in a certain section of their classroom here. And again, we're trying to get kids comfortable with the idea that yes, lots of things have changed. Yes, home is not school. If it was, we'd have done it that way all along. There are many more resources and people who are trained to support you, and parents are doing a super job putting that effort in on that. But we want them to use us as their support. Erica did a great job explaining what we have for support for kiddos. We hear from parents when they need it. Oftentimes we hear from kids. I had a little first grader write a note and hold it up so I could read it. And so then he and I talked a little bit, and I said, well, are you okay now? And he goes, yeah, it's just like I was in your office. And I said, no, it's not. I've got other stuff in my office. And he laughed. He was fine. Again, it's all about making sure we can stabilize and help parents do that. So when we talk about expectations, I will tell you the teachers are tracking. We are blessed, and God bless IT, because they have made sure that staff and parents have access to them with questions and how do I get this started? How do I get my kid logged in? We sent home a lot of that information, but when parents like me like it better when you're doing face-to-face conversation, we could not ask for more support than IT is giving us. So when all is said and done, teachers will have feedback to offer parents, not grades, but as Erica said, narrative feedback specific to tasks students were asked to do. And we will be able to, when they come back to school, assess what standards do we need to work on as we go forward that they missed during this gap. This school closure is not their fault any more than it's anyone else's fault, but they're little and they just feel like everything's out of whack. So our job is to straighten that up and make sure that when they come back, we're doing the assessments that we always did, and that we're making sure that we have programming appropriate for whatever they missed. So again, I'd like to thank the board and the superintendent and everybody else who's helped in this endeavor. It's not easy. People are worrying about it day and night, parents, staff, teachers, everybody involved. When we settle down, our devices went home last week, we will know more now about who can't really access. Some didn't have devices before, some didn't have internet. Some were going to get internet when they got devices. So we'll know more within the next week about what other accommodations we need to make. But we are going to continue the rest of this school year in the most positive, progressive way possible. And we'll offer every bit of support that we can, moral and every other thing. But I want to thank everybody involved, because it sure has made it better that we're all doing this together. Anything, oh, I know, Mr. Higgins, would you like me to talk about homework? And I mean work at home.
If you would like to talk about homework, Mrs. Lewis, that would be fine.
I'll do it quickly. We suggested, and originally we had a longer time frame, but as teachers were working in Google Classrooms and working with eSpark and Seesaw and the Zoom, that's been a wonderful technique. They realized that approximately 60 minutes of learning per day on the average is probably the most reasonable. And I checked with other school districts, and that's the direction they were going for kindergarten. In first and second grade, we said 60 to 90 minutes of learning activity, but any portion of that can be the reading that we would normally support that same time frame for. 3 and 4, actually 3 to 5, 90 to 120 minutes, and that varies from day to day, week to week. But teachers are getting into a schedule, so kids are getting more into the habit, and parents are the ones that, a lot of the ones that I've heard from are loving it. So this is an evolving process. We'll do better and better as we go along, all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis.
Mrs. Thomas, there are a couple of other parts of the plan, and I would hope that, would ask that Mrs. McEachern Murphy talk about special ed, Mrs. Corman Ramos talk a little bit about our employee support, And if
Oh.
Mrs. Clifford has an update on IT, I think that would be appropriate also, and then I can cover the nutritional piece.
Okay.
Perfect. I'm all set, guys. I'm a visual kind of Oh, I was gonna try to screen share, but I can't. Bummer. I even have a PowerPoint for you all. Keep us focused. Okay, so I just want to say I really, really appreciate the opportunity to share the remote learning plan that we have for special education, because I don't always speak in these meetings. And I want to make sure that anyone here is aware that the people in special services have been absolutely amazing. Special education really requires us to collaborate and to problem solve creatively and meaningfully, ongoingly. And I think that this has been a moment in time where I've seen this staff really pull together and shine in ways that I never had dreamed possible. And it's from the sincerest thanks in the bottom of my heart. I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you to all of the staff. So to kind of frame our remote learning in special ed land and 504 land as well, I want to note that the Individuals with Disabilities Act, the IDEA, was created to ensure that students with disabilities are provided with a free and appropriate public education that's tailored to meet their individual needs. However, it was not designed for a pandemic. It was not designed to specifically address any kind of a situation in which schools were closed for an extended period of time because of exceptional circumstances, and that's right now. So it's not just Maine, it's nationally. Everybody is struggling with the same issues, questions, and concerns about special education and how things are going to roll out in the long run. We in Ellsworth, Maine are no different than anywhere else in the nation. Wonderfully, the education department at the federal and the state level really understand how significantly this is impacting our services and how we provide them. And there are multiple webinars each day for both the state and federal level to help guide special educators through this. So please rest assured that staff is engaging in these. They're working tirelessly to ensure that, to the best of our ability, individual student needs for specially designed instruction, for supplementary services, and for accommodations are all being supported. So flexibility. This really defines the essence of special education, and it's certainly the most vital part to remote specially designed instruction. Now, when we send work home, when we consider assessing, when we consider grading, we're looking at calculating the pacing and the provision of individualized coursework necessary to provide a meaningful educational benefit and to support moving forward, most importantly, while maintaining the intent of the IEP. Considerations on how to best carry out the intent of the IEP include student and family readiness to learn remotely, the importance of preventing regression, the importance of building meaningful life skills, and the importance of generalizing those skills to the home environment. I have to share briefly that I've seen that happen a couple times in IEP meetings this week, where parents have talked about, my child did this, and the school staff is just shocked because this child has never done it in the school environment before. I've had students who don't always participate in IEP meetings peek on and wave to their teachers because they miss them. So it's been quite an experience moving to the remote learning. And I really echo some of what Kathy and Erica was saying, specifically around the engagement with students. Something that we're really very mindful of is that the rigor of the classwork and the expectations of independent student or parent supported learning is really examined on an individualized and case-by-case basis. It's very different in every home. So special educators are connecting with families and colleagues by landlines, by cell phones, by email, video conferencing, using Google Meet, using Zoom, using Google Classrooms, and the good old postal service. They are also assessing and providing feedback via these modalities. Scheduled IEP and 504 meetings have been moving forward using Google Meet. That allows for both video and phone conferencing, and the district, thank you IT, has made sure that's a FERPA compliant platform so that we are maintaining your child's privacy. I'm seeing Kathy smile. IT really is a lifesaver. Special education case managers are meeting weekly in addition to holding their team level PLCs in order to refine and to improve emergency remote learning services, to problem solve, and to create a planful reintegration for students when the buildings are reopened for learning. These forums are also allowing, and I find this to be very important, they're also allowing all of us as educators to support each other through the emotional and the social upheaval of this pandemic. In order to address internet connectivity challenges similar to other people, we are sending home individualized low-tech, no-tech packets that ensure this equity of learning among students who do not have access to internet or digital services. And there's a point person on each child's IEP team who's contacting a parent and or student at minimum weekly. We were all in the first week or two and quickly realized that was way too much information and phone call and contact for parents. So we've pared down to having one IEP team member that knows the child's best, calling at least once a week, and finding out how the child is doing and whether or not any of the special service providers need to contact them in return, such as OT, PT, or speech. This is the same thing for 504. The 504 case manager is also doing this, and that is either a special educator in grades K through 4, or it is one person who manages them grades 5 through 8. The 504 plans are still being continued, and there's contact being made there, and we're following the accommodations. So again, those people just let other members of the team know when to contact families to reduce the overwhelming feeling of too many people calling. So materials that are being sent home, they reflect the student's needs as documented on the IEP. Staff assesses each individual student's learning style, the pace at which they work, their capacity to learn independently when creating work to go home. Not all students can have, for a variety of different reasons, someone there with them the whole time. So that's something we have to take into consideration. Equitable activities are being provided in both print and digital formats and being adapted for visual disabilities as well as hearing disabilities. I've had a couple of meetings and that's been going very well so far. In addition to the pickup drop-offs that everyone else has already talked about, we also send things home via email or via the postal service if necessary. I have to say, special educators, the teachers are getting really creative about how to use materials and having students almost scavenger hunt the houses for things to help deliver instruction. Communication and student progress is documented in a student-parent contact log. And this log is designed to ensure adherence to the intent of the IEP. And then the log includes specifics on instructional support, on therapeutic concerns, and on behavioral concerns. Each log also includes a short contact summary note, and data from all of that automatically loads into a spreadsheet. And that is designed to really assist us when we're back into the brick and mortar building to figure out where students are and how do we pick up where we left off. We're making the contact log piece of this available to parents and guardians and Infinite Campus as well. Meet and Zoom supported study halls and instructional sessions are utilized to reinforce and reteach standards that are taught in the special education setting, as well as supporting the general education setting. Many of our students require that support. In some cases, one-to-one ed techs are still able to support their students, which is absolutely amazing to see that in practice. Virtual supported study halls, particularly at the high school and middle school level, are assisting in monitoring student progress on IEP goals, and they are also ensuring that the appropriate modifications and accommodations on their IEP and 504s are being implemented. So among the methods of contact previously mentioned, students are also able to share their coursework to be assessed for feedback via web-based platforms like Google Classroom. I should note too that I'm also using those with staff members, and that special ed case managers have their own Google Classroom and ed techs have their own Google Classroom, and that's a way to centrally disperse information and to allow them to have ongoing communication and provide them with updated information and ongoing opportunities such as links to professional development. Many special educators and ed techs along with them have established office hours. Service providers have established office hours, and therapists as well. And these are meant to support IEP goals. And in some cases, it really does allow that connection with peers that they're missing right now. I have a district-wide special education remote learning calendar that lets me know at any time who is delivering a service, who are the people involved, and at what time will that happen on a regular and ongoing basis. And to kind of reflect what Mrs. Lewis was saying, that I'm seeing people fall more into a pattern. And as that pattern is established, I think we're all kind of calming down too. And I think we're going to see the kids engage more. So I really want to stress that thoughtful consideration has been given to ensure the intent of the IEP is carried out during this emergency remote learning period. And special educators are recommending small bites, and I would listen very loud and clear to like what Mrs. Lewis said for times, especially for the littles, 60 minutes for the little ones, maybe up to 90 minutes when you get into the 4th grade and that age period. But small bites with frequent breaks is very important. And when we're talking on a one-to-one basis, special educators in tandem with the parent or guardian also look at what is this child in particular capable of at this time, considering the circumstances we're under and considering how they learn anyway. So everything is being looked at on an individual basis, and many different factors come to bear on readiness for learning at home that are oftentimes beyond the control of the parents. So our teachers are really encouraging natural learning in a fun way while stressing how learning is relevant and how it is reinforced in daily life. We don't learn in a vacuum. Occupational therapists, physical therapists, and speech service providers are all part of an IEP team. Not every IEP, but they're part of the team. And I think it's really cool that the occupational therapists that are school-based in Hancock County have come together and created their own YouTube channel. And they're co-creating videos that provide learning opportunities. They're contacting parents to see how kids are doing with this. And those consultations and check-ins are really based on the individual student and family needs. They're called Viral OTs, and they're on YouTube. Again, they're called Viral OTs, and they're on YouTube, and they've got some cool exercises. You don't have to need OT to have fun with those with a little kid. Physical therapy, our physical therapist has sent home exercise programs, and she's touching base with parents on an as needed or as requested basis. And it all depends upon what the family's needs, wants, and desires are regarding their child, and what is feasible within the home setting for physical therapy. Speech services, our speech providers are using Meet and Zoom to support students, as well as using low-tech, no-tech options where they can support learning that parents can maybe assist them with. They also have regular appointments for therapy support, and office hours are available for them. Our consultants on IEP, such as our autism specialist, our board certified behavior analyst, our hearing consultants, our vision consultants, they're all still with us. They're attending IEP meetings, and they are actively involved with us. Our BCBA, for example, is highly involved in the life skills rooms and has been a very big part of co-collaborating with us in creating the programs that are helping EdTech stay connected to their students and helping our most vulnerable students find a way to access that support while they're out of school. And I find this to be critical. The IEP, when we look at grading and progress for IEPs, I'm in a little bit of a different world because we do base our grading and progress report on what the child can do and at the pace that they can do it. So the IEP progress report will reflect what progress or regression can be meaningfully documented based on parent-teacher and student-teacher communication in a narrative. The student's progress towards goals will not be graded in favor of informing parents where the students will pick up again when returning to school. This is very similar to the K-4 concept. The student and parent contact log that we have created, and I mentioned earlier, will help us inform the narrative as well as inform academic decisions upon return to school on what areas should receive focus for remediation, for reteaching, or for providing more challenge. Some of our kids are really doing well right now. Choosing not to grade students on their IEP goals is not a decision that was easy, but it is made from compassion and consideration for our most marginalized students. Not all students have access to the internet, nor do they have parents or guardians that can be home to support their learning. Not grading the IEP goals is meant to do no further harm. I think the pandemic has that covered. Too many students are trying to learn while experiencing myriad social issues such as homelessness, and food instability, among many other stressful and traumatic life situations. And that's a really nice segue into another piece of the service delivery in IEP world and 504 land. Clinical and guidance staff are also meeting weekly to plan for current needs and projected needs upon return to school. These mental health providers are serving grades K through 12, and they are available for families who have concerns about their children's academic, social, emotional, and behavioral development. Students can check in to process and problem solve emotional concerns that they may be experiencing. Parents can check in to get support. And they have sent out a letter, as Erica mentioned, and they've detailed when they're available, who they are, and how to contact them. So mental health support, they note in their letter too, they'll continue to provide that space for students to explore their thoughts and feelings via telephone as well as video consultation. And they may create individual support plans based on what the needs of the student and the family are. So this collaboration is really important because it also often connects families to resources, and resources are going to be very important right now. So lots of things are different for now in Maine, especially for teens due to the COVID-19. And I'm going to take this little chance to note that we got something sent to us today from the Department of Education, where there is a new teen support text line that NAMI Maine is sponsoring. And that's for kids who are just feeling isolated or alienated and need somebody to talk to. It is not a crisis line. And if anyone's interested in any details about that, I can certainly share it. Like I said, I had a nice little PowerPoint for y'all, but I couldn't show you. So I'm happy to share the resources on that PowerPoint to you. Just give me a shout out and I will do that. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. If you have any questions, ask away. And I know that the special educators that I work with really miss their kids and cannot wait to get back into the classroom. So thank you. Questions, anyone? Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rachel Como Ramos, is she there someplace?
He is.
You're on mute, Rachel.
Rachel?
Hey, Brenda, I don't know if you want me to go while she's trying to figure it out. I just messaged her. I think her microphone is muted.
April, why don't you go ahead and go, and while we're waiting for Rachel, I can then do nutrition after that.
Perfect. So we have been working to gather information and looking to provide hotspots for kids. We are in the process of getting a couple of quotes right now and looking to determine if we can get delivery quickly. I have not heard anything from the state. I do know that they have issued some devices to the counties that are in greatest need. I know that that's going pretty well with the devices that that they've issued to those specific counties, but I've not heard anything back directly about what the state will provide us. So we've started to go out on our own to be able to provide service for students and families. So we're in the process of that right now. We'll have a finalized situation hopefully within the next couple of days, that I'll be able to speak with Mr. Higgins about directly on Monday or Tuesday of next week. I just wanted to let parents know that as IT has been helping teachers and students and parents, we've started to compile resources and we've placed them on the district webpage. I'm going to share that link out tomorrow morning on the Facebook page so that parents will be able to see that. But any of our resources about if you're having trouble accessing Zoom, or what is Google Classroom or Google Meets, or any of those resources that we've created a parent-friendly version of those so that they're able to just have more general information and be more familiar with programs that we're offering. But we've worked really hard to do that. I know I've spoke with many parents on the phone, and as IT staff members have, as we've worked on password resets and logins to Zoom and Google Meets, and working with parents to be able to make sure that they're able to access those things. And we've had really good feedback and really good reception for those. We've swapped out a couple of devices that the microphones weren't quite working right, or they need a new charger. We've got a system set up for those in both all 3 school locations. So we're pretty happy about the way things are going with regard to that. And just make sure that you check the website if you have questions or looking for more information with regarding the programs that students are accessing and how to get access to them.
Thank you. Rachel?
This is Thomas. While we're waiting for Rachel, why don't I go ahead and do nutrition and the employee supports and expectations. I can also touch if she's not able to get back on. Both of them
Excellent
relatively short sections, but I would follow up on Mrs. Clifford's report with regard to the solution from the state and the devices that they're providing. We did have a conference call with the commissioner on Friday. A solution in terms of devices, there's such a backlog on what they need. The solution is probably weeks away rather than days away. So I think the fact that our local IT department is moving forward with solutions that we can address locally, and we expect that we're going to get reimbursed for it also. I think that's a step in the right direction for our school department, and hopefully a positive for our parents and students out there that still don't have that access. But as far as the nutritional support, I can make this very brief. We're going to continue to provide food services for our students throughout the balance of the school year. One is through the Department of Education program. And again, I reiterate, that is the summer program that we've been made eligible for, which allows us to provide meals to all of our students, regardless of age, at no cost to our families. And I'll come back to that in a second. We're also intending to continue the donated food delivery program. And I can tell you that we received over 100 boxes of food yesterday. Mr. Daly was at the school, Tuesday. Mr. Daly was at the school and receiving that. He thinks we have enough food supplies to do 3 more rounds of deliveries. So that's 3 more weeks of food for well over 100 families. With regard to the Department of Ed program, our pickup program, a couple of things. One is we're hoping that the waivers we received will carry us through the end of September, which means that we could continue to provide meals for families as long as the COVID virus was still a situation. The other piece that I would encourage families to do, and the Department of Ed has encouraged us to put this out there, if we have families whose economic conditions have changed, and I suspect there's a number of them who have, we encourage them to fill out a free and reduced lunch application. Not only will that help them now and in the future, it may also put the Ellsworth School Department at a point where we reach the 50% level that Mr. Daly has talked about for so many years, which would keep us eligible for that program in the future. So it's a very positive piece with the nutritional program. As our other administrators have said, our staff has done yeoman's work to prepare the meals, to prepare the pickup sites, to deliver the meals and foodstuffs to families. So we're very fortunate to have them doing the work, and we're also very fortunate to have such a widely generous community who just steps up and makes food donations and monetary donations. Any questions on that, folks?
Thank you.
Rachel, are you on?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, okay. Thank you all for your texts and your emails. I appreciate it. Annie and April and Kathy called me. I feel so loved. All right. I've got an IT team like in real time here. All right. I was already on a Zoom call today, so I don't know what happened. Anyway, hi, Beck. Here I am. As I was saying, we have several supports for teachers who want to do professional development. You've heard about all the IT support that's been provided for teachers who need to learn more about remote learning and online learning. So that's been a lot of learning just right there. And we've encouraged teachers with the time that they've spent learning more about Google Classroom and learning about Google Meets and Zoom to log that time. They've been each sent a log that they can write down the times that they have new learning. And there's been a lot for all of us. And we want teachers to know that we value that time that they're spending and that that we will, create contact hour certificates for that. I've talked to Brian Smith, who works in certification, and he is happy to have teachers use those experiences and those hours towards their certification. We're developing ways in which teachers who don't have consistent online access or ed techs and the faculty, the staff in maintenance and transportation and food service can have hard copy articles sent to them, and they can answer, a few questions about those articles and turn that in to get their contact hours, so that there's other ways of, documenting new learning. We have a Target Solutions program, which is the online platform that we use for the beginning of the year, the mandatory programs like bloodborne pathogens and all the things that teachers need to learn before they start the school year. And that has a huge library of programs and courses for maintenance, like ladder safety and that kind of thing, food safety for us food service folks, and different kinds of things about construction safety and transportation safety as well. So those are available. We found that most of those folks have access to the Wi-Fi at home. And so that will be accessible for them. Teachers have already been sending me different things that they found online. This is a great opportunity for lots of companies out there to make learning more accessible. And so all of a sudden, there's every single company you can think of is realizing that they should have an online platform. So we found lots of ways for teachers to learn new things and to document them. Some of the programs that we have, one called PD in Focus, that creates courses with around books written by educational researchers. It has questions, it has group chats, it has a journal built in so teachers can keep notes about that. I've had several teachers contact me saying that this is very useful for coursework that they're taking for their own, their own progress through their education. So we're pleased that we already have that. It's something that other school districts have asked us about. So I'm proud that we have those things in place already and have had for 2 years. So there's several different places that teachers have been able to find new learning. Of course, our teachers, our classroom teachers, there's certainly no demand whatsoever that they add that to their plate, because they have so much going on already and just meeting the needs of all their students, both social, emotional, and academic. But there are some who have been interested in doing that as well, and we're happy to provide those opportunities. Our ed techs have been doing a lot of work, but for those who aren't able to come in or don't have direct time with their students, they'll have opportunities to do this as well, to move towards certification or getting additional certificates themselves. Are there other things you can think of? I may not be thinking of the things that you have questions about, but I'm happy to answer them if you do.
Thank you, Rachel.
Mrs. Thomas, if I could add one thing, and thank you, Rachel. I also want to give credit to Rachel and other staff that she's worked with to come up with the menu of professional development activities for all of our staff. But I think one thing that's important to know is, and I know you have heard this as a board, but when the closure occurred and Governor Mills made her executive order, she deemed that all school department staff were considered essential and were either expected to work or be on call throughout the closure period. So as Rachel just said, not all of our staff members are able to come in, in some cases because we can't have that many people in the school and still abide by social and physical distancing practices, or they're in a high risk group or any of those types of situations. So we've made a lot of efforts possible for staff who are not able to be in for a variety of reasons to be able to do work from home that will not only benefit them, but benefit the school department. And I think it's been a real positive piece. So I appreciate all the work of our staff, including Mrs. Korman Ramos, for getting all that in place. So very good.
Thank you. And one other piece too, I do want to add that Debbie Richards, our instructional coach, has been working hard from home. She has been collecting materials and getting them out to teachers. She's a consistent part of the high school risk review team and is listening for anything that kids who need extra support could use. She's been working with me on developing that menu. She's developing courses in PD and Focus based on what she sees teachers need. And so she's been in constant communication with teachers and different groups, as well as with me on developing new content. So I'm very grateful to her for her help as well.
Thank you.
So Mrs. Thomas, I think there's one more piece of the plan that would be good for everybody to review. And
Yes.
if everybody wants to look at the last page with the remainder of the school year calendar. A couple of things before we talk in a little more in detail about the calendar. With this remote learning plan that will be submitted, excuse me, the plan won't be submitted, but the minutes from your meeting next week when you approve it in whatever final format it is, what that does is waives the required number of student instructional days. It does not waive the number of work days for our staff. So in looking at the entire COVID-19 situation, all the changes, challenges, stresses, anxieties that have resulted not just from families and students, but also from our staff, because it's an entirely new world with remote learning and providing food and so forth. One of the things that districts across the state and districts in Hancock County have talked about is what is an appropriate way to conclude the school year for students, but also to provide our staff with opportunities to successfully and appropriately and adequately close down the year in terms of collecting student work, assessing student work, assigning final grades, having opportunities to assess and review what standards didn't get covered for whatever reason. Were students unable to access? Were students not attending regularly? So a variety of those pieces. So this schedule is designed to provide those things to happen so that we can close out the year successfully and hopefully start planning for next September. So just to very quickly go through it. Under this piece here, we will be looking at Friday, June 5th as the final day of remote learning for students. A period of Saturday, June 6th through Wednesday, June 11th would be for standards recovery at Ellsworth High School, Hancock County Technical Center. Monday, June 8th, Tuesday, June 9th would be makeup work and teacher office hours. And we've listed for the time being Wednesday, June 10th through Thursday, June 18th as building level teacher professional days. Now this is not intended to be professional development or in service. What these days are intended for are to incorporate activities that you see down at the bottom on the bulleted list. It could be standards recovery. As I said, reviewing standards that were not covered and planning how to address them in the fall of 2020. Finalizing year-end reports for students, parents, guardians, and next year's teachers. Placement and discussion decisions and discussions for students in grades K through 8. You know, you heard Ms. Gabinelli and Mrs. Lewis talk about retention is not likely to be an issue, particularly if it's as a result of anything associated with COVID, but still there's discussion on placement in the next year. Also an opportunity for students who are transitioning from grade 8 to grade 9 for those scheduling and placement discussions to take place between those teachers. Reflection and review of successes and challenges of remote and distance learning for a couple of reasons. One, as our commissioner has said on many occasions, this is an emergency. This is a difficult situation and a challenging situation. But one of the things that we should try to glean from it is, are there things that we've learned through this remote learning process that could be incorporated into our repertoire in coming years? You know, one simple example would be we could eliminate storm days. You know, you have a storm day coming, we make sure kids have their devices at home, you have a remote learning day, and you keep your calendar intact. But there are also potential other applications for remote learning. And the other piece that we don't want to think about, and we certainly hope doesn't happen, but I know that some of my colleagues across the state are concerned that we may start in the fall of 2020 on a remote learning piece. Again, I don't put that out there because I think it's going to happen, but it's certainly something that's possible and could be part of our conversation. Also allows for preparing plans for administering CTE certification exams. So that entire schedule of activities has not been devised as to what would take place on each day. It may be building based, it may be grade span based, but it's something that we've looked at as a leadership team, and I know some of our principals have talked about it with their staff members. And I can also say that in Hancock County, all of our school systems are considering this type of a model where instruction may end on June 5th. And I think it's important that we understand that that's important because we have tuition students that come from other districts. We have students that come to HCTC. So it would be beneficial if there was a final day of instruction that is somewhat common. The other piece, as you know, with calendars, we do have a meet and consult with the Teachers Association. I have been in contact with the Teachers Association president. And there are some questions as to what those days might look like, Wednesday, June 10th to June 18th. But this is a structure that we feel pretty confident in, and we think would be a positive way to end for students and families and for our staff. So with that being said, I would entertain any questions, as would the rest of our administrators.
I don't necessarily have any questions, but I do want to commend everybody on this. It covers a lot, and it certainly goes to show how much hard work has been put into considering every single level of student and the retention that we're, hoping for and looking for. So I just really want to thank everybody for all of their hard work, because I'm sure, like I said the last meeting, there's a lot of concern, sleepless nights, and everybody's been working so hard, and I can see it in everything that you've presented, because everybody, from top to bottom seems to be putting forth, answering every question that could be out there. And we all have to be in the situation where sometimes those answers aren't out there. And so the patience and the kindness and all of that that I'm seeing is really, really appreciated from myself. And so I just wanted to comment on that. And any of the questions that I had going into this, they were all answered as you spoke. So, I feel pretty confident in anything I had wondered about. So thank you.
I'd like to echo what Jen said. I really appreciate all the hard work that the administrative team has done, and it was great to hear from you all tonight. Caroline, it's nice to hear from you. We don't normally hear from you at a school board meeting, and I really appreciate all the work that your department has done. I do have one question. It's not directly related to remote learning, but it's kind of tangential in a way. And I know you probably don't have a definitive answer yet on this because there's a lot of moving parts, but I'm wondering what kind of discussions the leadership team has had around some of the significant end of year events like high school graduation and 8th grade graduation, and of course there's others as well. And again, I know that you haven't, I'm sure you're not at a point now where you can definitively say what the plan is, but I'm wondering what kind of conversations you've been having.
Mr. Markosian, I'll go first, and then if the other administrators would like to weigh in. I know conversations we've had around our table, we're looking not just at high school graduation or 8th grade promotion, but also our adult ed graduation and HCTC. It's not graduation, but our award ceremony, which is akin to a graduation. So what I have conversed with the principals about is what kind of an appropriate recognition ceremony could we provide, either virtual, postponed until this entire thing passes, or a combination of both. What are things that we can do to make this an appropriate recognition ceremony, not just for kids, not just for parents, but for our staff members, for our board, and also for our community, because all of those people play a significant role in the education of our children as they go through our school system. So that's the conversation we've had, and you're right, Paul, there's no answer yet, but I would also add that I have been contacted by 2 local media organizations who would like to do something special for our senior class. And I've said to both of them that we're working on some options in-house, but would certainly be willing to partner with them. Our kids may not have the exact same graduation that all of us had, but I have a strong, confident belief that they're going to have a lot of memories that they're going to take away from them at the end of this school year that none of us will have ever had the opportunity to have. So I would let any of the other administrators weigh in if they'd like. And they don't have to if they don't want to.
Well, I would just say that, you know, while we haven't made any decisions about what's going to happen, I know that I talked with my 8th grade students last week on a Zoom meeting. We had an 8th grade class meeting on Zoom meeting. And, you know, I reassured them that we are going to be recognizing them. And I think probably Mr. Clifford echoes the same sentiments, that we are going to make sure that these kids are recognized. It may not be the way that we have traditionally done it. But we are hoping that we can come up with a positive way to make sure that they are recognized.
And this is on the agenda for Hancock County principals meeting on Tuesday, because for HCTC, I'll have to make sure whatever I do is in conjunction with all of the high schools. So that's on our agenda for Tuesday when we meet, is to kind of brainstorm and talk about what this might look like so that we can make sure everyone's included.
In terms of adult education, we're in a tough situation because for many of our graduates taking the official HiSET test awards that diploma. So I'm just sort of holding my breath and trying to, you know, consider options at this point, but we'll find a way. We always do, to celebrate people, and it may happen in the fall for adult education if we're able to do testing this summer, for example. Who knows, but we'll figure out some way to honor our students.
And as Mr. Higgins said, you know, at the high school, you know, June 12th is getting closer and closer. And if everything stays the same, you know, then we would do something virtually on June 12th. And then if it lifts in, you know, it could be July, it could be early August, you know, then we could have a regular graduation. That's what I'm hoping for. You know, but we'll just see what the time brings and decisions that need to be made as we get closer to June 12th.
I'd like to thank everybody. I can't imagine the amount of stress you're all under to get all this work done and to do everything in a totally different way than education has traditionally been delivered. It's just amazing to me. We are certainly fortunate to have such a highly qualified professional group of administrators and teachers in the city of Ellsworth. Thank you very much.
Brenda, I won't repeat what you just said, but could I add a few groups to that? You know, certainly I think our ed techs, our food service staff, our maintenance staff, all of our specialists, in addition to the work our administrators and teachers have done, those folks have also moved heaven and earth throughout this closure period. And we're very fortunate and blessed to have them as part of our staff as well.
I totally agree.
I'd like to add, this is Kathy, and I'd like to add in our bus drivers who have volunteered their time generously above and beyond to make sure that our kiddos are getting food and devices. They'll make runs all day Wednesday, and on Thursday morning check with us to see if anybody called and said they didn't get something. They have been amazing. So I want to shout out for them as well. And while I have the mic here, one of the celebrations for the end of the year, Mr. Higgins, that you forgot is my retirement party. And you don't have to worry about how it gets done. I'll be happy.
Mrs. Lewis, may I say something?
Oh, I think I have to mute you.
You can. Your retirement has been rescinded.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Funny how that happened again, Mrs. Lewis.
Over and over and over.
I just want to say that I really have appreciated the role of the community supporting our efforts. I know that I felt it in adult education, but and a big part of that are the parents, because we all know that parents are children's first teachers, but they didn't sign up for this situation. And I know from our adult ed students who are parents that it's a challenge. And so hats off to families for supporting their kids in this process.
Thank you.
So, Mrs. Thomas, with regard to the plan here, I think one piece that needs to be finalized is just to get the meet and consult done with the Teachers Association. But I think hearing that there are very few questions coming from you folks, this is probably the plan that's going to be presented to the board next week for approval. And I would echo what Jen and Paul said. It shows a lot of great work on the part of a lot of people to make sure that our kids are taken care of. So I appreciate them all being here tonight to present.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Are we all set? Ready to move on? Item B is the review of the FY21 Ellsworth School Department budget.
Well, Mrs. Thomas, if it's okay with the board, I would give the administrators the option of staying if they'd like, but if they don't want to stay, they don't have to. But I would just say, be checking your emails tomorrow and probably over the weekend, because there's still work to do on the budget. You're probably going to be asked to find some more things. You're welcome to stay with that little.
Dan and Brenda, I just, before we move on to the next portion, I've gotten a couple of questions.
Okay.
From the public, and they might be, I think they relate more to the discussion that the topic we just covered. So is it all right to ask them now? Okay.
Yes.
One question is from about bus drivers. And let me just find it here. Does it affect the schedule that you described for the end of the year? Does it affect bus drivers where school gets out? Typically, school would have gotten out later. And I know the bus driver, I'm not sure exactly what this question is referring to, affecting the bus drivers, because we're doing remote learning, but.
Well, maybe this will help. As Mrs. Lewis just said, our bus drivers are the same as every other employee. There's an expectation that they either work or are on call, and that goes through the last day of the year, which would be June 18th. And certainly, as long as we're continuing to provide the food delivery, they will be part of that process. They also have opportunities to work at the bus garage in a socially and physically safe distancing manner. So there are many opportunities for them to work through the end of the school year, as the rest of our employees do. I don't know if that answers the individual's question, but our drivers are certainly active and part of the process of serving our kids.
Okay, thank you. And then a question from Tara Mason about community service requirements for high school students. Will it be adjusted for the current seniors and possibly underclassmen that missed the end of this school year?
Yeah, and we're gonna have to it'll kind of be an individual basis or individual case. I've gotten a lot of emails from students, and just because of the emergency that we're in, my answer has been to them, whatever you can do around the house to help your parents, to help your family, we'll count that. But if there are some seniors that come in and they're 4 hours short or 10 hours short, we're gonna have to take a look at each case as to why.
Thank you. Paul, you're muted.
You're right, sorry. Final question from a teacher, from Andrew Ford, asking about the final teacher days in school. Would it be in school or remote? And you may not know the answer to that now, but.
Yeah, I think that's a good question from Mr. Ford. It may be a combination of both. I know we have some of our staff members who want to be in the school in a socially and physically safe distancing way, to do some of their tasks. But certainly it could be remote. If you look at that list of activities at the bottom of that draft calendar, many of those are things that involve discussions and sharing of information that can be done through Zoom or any of our other online mechanisms. That's yet to be determined.
Okay, that's all the questions that have come in through email or the Zoom Q&A.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. The review of the proposed FY21 Ellsworth School Department budget.
Sorry. I hope you all got the documents that I sent to you late this afternoon. I sent them late this afternoon because I was still working on the budget at about 4:15. But just to capture things in a Reader's Digest type of version, at our April 14th meeting, we talked about the conditions resulting from the COVID-19 virus situation and the resulting significant financial impact, not just locally, but statewide and also across the country and the world for that matter. With all of those factors in place, we know that the next 2 to 3 budget cycles are going to be very, very difficult and challenging. We're fortunate that through the balance of this year, we expect to get through the year without any loss of revenue. So no difficult decisions would have to be made this year. As of this evening, we are still of the understanding that school subsidy levels are going to be the same for next year as what we've seen as late as March 27th, but that certainly could change. We've also been advised by the commissioner to be prepared for FY22 and possibly FY23 as difficult years also. So with all of those pieces, the board's finance committee and I recommended that we craft a budget for next year that achieves the goal of no increase to the local appropriation over what was appropriated this year. In doing so, we're still going to have to comply with our annual goal and objective of adequately and appropriately funding public education while being fiscally responsible. And it will be a challenge. But as of this afternoon, with the documents that I sent you, we revised our budget proposal, which if you look way back to the beginning was close to a 9 or a 10% increase when you included all proposals, to a version that was down to 7.3% about 6 weeks ago. That currently has an increase in expenditures of 2.88%. So we've cut nearly $1.6 million from the initial draft. And again, I just want to clarify, the initial draft that we had included every proposal and every initiative that we wanted to have in front of the board. We knew that they would all not survive, but that's where the process started. But we're down to a 2.8% increase right now, which is progress. The challenge remains is that we still have an increase of nearly 1.67% or $194,000 to the local appropriation. And I'll come back to that in a second. So just so you understand, we've made a number of reductions from the initial draft. In regular instruction, we have eliminated all proposed new teaching positions. Special education, we've eliminated proposed new positions that are not mandated by law or an IEP. Have also amended our out-of-district placement line, which is an estimate every year because we don't know how many students we're going to have here that require out-of-the-district placement, or how many may move in or how many may move out. Career and technical education, we have eliminated a teaching position due to declining enrollment. And with regard to the 2 new programs that the board approved a while back, we are suspending the proposed cybersecurity program and have reduced the budget by the instructor amounts and the equipment amounts, and also reduce the associated construction renovation costs. Okay. However, we are going to maintain the hospitality program. It's important that everybody understands the reason for that. With the additional funding that we received from the Department of Education to support the 2 new programs, $143,000, $73,000 was allocated to cybersecurity, $70,000 was allocated to the hospitality program. Cybersecurity program, in and of itself, not counting construction, exceeded the amount of subsidy we would receive by a fair margin. Hospitality program is well below the amount that we're receiving. So when you take cybersecurity out and eliminate the associated construction costs, renovation costs, and put the hospitality program in an existing classroom, we would actually have a negative financial impact on the local appropriation if we were to cut hospitality. We would be reducing the budget by one amount and reducing revenues by a larger amount. So that's what's happening at HCTC. Other instruction, which includes your summer programming, your after-school programming, your co and extracurricular programs. We've eliminated equipment, uniform, travel, and dues expenses. Student and staff support, we have eliminated the proposed new positions. System administration, which is the school board and the superintendent and the business office, we've reduced proposed expenditures for legal, advertising, and supplies. Building administration, which is our principal's offices, we've reduced professional development, travel, postage, and some other smaller items. But I would say to you, it's not the large holes in the side of boats that sinks, and it's all of the little ones that cause the little leaks. So every little bit helps. Facilities and maintenance, we have reduced expenses to comply with historical expenditures. We've deferred a number of maintenance projects by priority, and we've eliminated the purchase of replacement pieces of equipment. In transportation, we were looking to add 2 new buses, one that would be funded by some subsidy from the Department of Education, which we would have purchased on a lease purchase program. We also were looking to purchase a propane bus that was funded 80% by the Volkswagen settlement. Because of what we're dealing with, we have eliminated the Department of Education bus. Right now, the propane bus remains in the budget at a cost of about $16,700 to us. The remaining $78,000 would be paid by VW. The reason that is still in there is because we have retired one of our lease purchase agreements, and this is simply replacing that, so it's a net 0 on the budget. But moving forward, it may be a case where we have to take that out. We've also reduced repair expenses and parts expenses as a result of significant work we've done on our bus fleet for the past 2 years, and that was planned maintenance. Adult education has reduced replacement of purchase of technology, reduced some training and development, and deferred the addition of needed classroom space until February. So those are the significant things that we are looking at reducing. Now, as I said to you, we're still looking at about $194,000 that needs to be reduced from the budget net to get us to a 0% local appropriation increase. That's going to take a lot of work, so I'll be working with the administrators over the next several days between now and Tuesday to arrive at that figure. But there is still another side of the ledger that we have to take a look at, and that is the revenue side. We're really close on revenues now. We've accounted for all the tuition from both HCTC and Ellsworth High School. We factored those numbers in. We're still working on the tuition for our special needs population. We do receive tuition dollars for students who are tuitioned here and receive services, who also have amount of time spent with teachers and ed techs. That number isn't finalized yet, so that is certainly going to help that $194,000 figure. The other place that we are looking at is our fund balance. And again, if you look down at the last part of the memo that I sent you, I just want to walk you through this so that you understand. If you were to set the COVID-19 situation aside, the way that our budget was progressing this year was the same as it had been in past years. We were projected to end up with a fund balance similar to what we've done over the past 4 or 5 years. So we would be able to consistently apply funds towards the budget. So as has happened historically, if you look on June 30th, 2019, our fund balance was $1.9 million. We applied $850,000 of that towards the FY20 budget, which left an available $1.1 million. Okay. And again, that's typical historically. Now, when you're looking at this current year, business manager Carolyn Heller does this exercise every year. She will project for us what we anticipate the balance at the end of the current budget year is. Normally, we'd be looking at expenses continuing throughout the balance of the year, but obviously since we've closed down, we're expecting that balance to be a bit higher. So what we're looking at right now is a projection of $1.8 million to be added to the available fund balance for a total of $2.9 million. Now, of that $2.9 million, remember a change in law a couple of years ago with regard to CTE funding requires that we calculate a separate CTE fund balance. So that amount of money is broken down to the undesignated fund balance of $2.7 million, CTE balance of $228,897.17. So right now in the draft of the budget on the budget summary spreadsheet that I sent you, we're applying $1.25 million fund balance to offset expenses. Now, that's an increase of $400,000 over last year. And as you recall from our past year's budget work, we've been trying to slowly reduce the amount that we apply to the budget so that we can get our fund balance at the level that's in accord with state guidelines. But given the fact that we're going to have additional money this year because we're not expending as much for the remainder of this year, we can put additional money to offset expenses, which will allow us not to make cuts that are going to let us go backwards. The other thing that it's going to allow us to do with the board support and with the council support is to transfer, and the model I've got in front of you is about $350,000 to a reserve account. Okay. In past years, we put money in capital reserve accounts to fund certain projects. We paid for equipment in the food service program. We paid for the replacement of the HCTC roof. We put money in there last year to go towards Del Luz Stadium. So the amount of money we have left over after applying $1.25 million, I'd like to transfer $78,000 of it to capital reserve specifically for Del Luz, transfer the remainder of what was not used at HCTC last year, about $22,000 also to general reserve, and put $350,000 in a general reserve. The legislature has acted in the past couple of years to allow school districts to create different types of reserves for contingencies for years moving forward. One example is a special education reserve. And we've talked about this in the budget in years past. One of the areas that we really don't know what to budget, we do our best to have the information, but is students that require placement outside of the district. You know, we finish a school year with a certain number of students who are placed outside of the district, but we don't know if they're going to stay here, if one of them is going to move away, or if one's going to move in. One of the reasons for having a reserve account of that nature is if you have one of those students move in requiring a $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 placement, there's money there that's not going to impact the budget. It's in a reserve account. In addition to special education reserve, we've been allowed to expand what reserve accounts can be used for. So this would be an opportunity for us to put money in a reserve account that's not an undesignated fund balance that can be used for those unforeseen contingencies and can also help us over the next couple of years in which budgeting is going to be challenging and difficult. Now again, that's a lot to digest in one setting, but I hope you can at least follow what I'm discussing and talking about in the table that I provided to you there. So before we go any further, I would certainly entertain any questions that folks have.
I have a question, Dan. Can you just cover and give us an idea of, I mean, I can gather some of the items, but what expenses for the school department would be lower during this time as a whole? So, because a lot of them are still constant.
Yeah. We're not expending money on fuel for our buses. You know, we're using buses on a much lower scale now. So that would be one example. Many of the maintenance projects we're planning on doing have not been done yet and may be deferred until next year. Mm-hmm. Some of the contracted services that we have would be expending money on will not be expended for the balance of this year. Some of them are through remote practices, but some of them will not be. So what we're looking at is those types of expenses that we're not going to incur, but we're also going to continue to get our revenues because, and this was something that came up in a conversation with the commissioner, should we still be charging tuition to students who are coming here from other communities? The answer is yes, we're providing services through the end of the year, so we're still going to bill for that. So that fund balance that we have is a combination of monies that we're not going to expend and revenues that we're still going to get.
Okay, thank you.
Good. I'll take the fact that there are no questions so far. Oh, go ahead, Abby.
I just have one small question, and it's not, you don't have to give an exact, but when through the process of the whole budget, will something be available for the public to look at for the budget?
Certainly, this is an odd year, Abby, because typically we've had a meeting with the council and we've done a presentation with them, and we've done a full-blown presentation with the board. The place where that's going to happen, again, I have not spoken with City Manager Cole, but next Tuesday night, there will be an in-depth presentation of what this budget includes for the public. And again, the other piece, it's a reality. It's not an excuse, it's a reality. With this entire COVID piece, when you're looking at getting remote learning plans in place with all of these people and keeping food programs going, our budget took a back seat for a couple of weeks, and that's unfortunate, but we will provide that information at the board meeting next week. And once it's in a finalized form, we always post it on our website anyway. And I suspect that the finance committee over on the council side is going to want to have a conversation too.
Good to know.
Dan, as a counterpart to Jen's question, are there any additional expenses we've had during this time period that we wouldn't have had due to the coronavirus situation?
Yep. Certainly our mailing expenses have gone up. And I see Mrs. Lewis nodding. You know, we've spent a lot of time sending information out through the regular mail, through UPS, for our regular education students, for our special needs students. So that's certainly an increase. There are going to be some technology costs. But one of the things that we've been has been communicated to us is that through the CARES Act, our COVID-related expenses, we're supposed to be able to be reimbursed for. We've been advised to track any of our expenses that are related to this closure situation. So, you know, that increased postage that we're talking about, we should be able to recoup those expenses, which would go into that fund balance. Any of the work that our employers are doing, fuel that we're spending specifically for COVID would get reimbursed. Any of the technology devices that Mrs. Clifford is working on, or the hotspot access apparatus that she's looking at, any of those types of things would be costs that we didn't anticipate. But again, we've been told those are likely to be reimbursable.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
So I think the other piece in closing on the budget, if you look at the summary sheet that I gave you, what we're seeing right now is a local appropriation increase of about $194,000 or 1.6%. In normal years, you'd feel pretty good about that. But I think given where we are, we need to find a way to get that down. So I will be working with our administrators over the next few days to find additional reductions that are not intended to make us move backwards. It's amazing what you can find when you're nickeling and diming a budget. The other piece is that there is likely to be some movement with some of the revenue lines there. The other piece is when you look at the fund balance, I really want to be cautious and don't over apply fund balance to offset expenses for next year, because we need to be looking 2 and 3 years out as well. But there's a possibility of increasing that line from 1.25 million to 1.3, maybe 1.325, and still keep us in an appropriate zone. And any increase in revenue would also serve to decrease that local appropriation. The other thing that I've provided to you as board members, the third sheet, what you're going to find is it's a combination of reductions that have been made since the start of the process. In some cases, you'll see a listing of a department that it is, or narrative of what the item is. You'll also see some account lines. That document comes from a shared document that business manager Heller and I use. So with the account lines in there, it helps us to track it much better. In some cases, when you're putting the information in, it comes more quickly to do it without an account line. But that's a log of things that have been reduced to this point. And as you can see, some of them are straightforward. They're specific items, they're specific positions. Some of them are taking certain accounts and saying, this is what's budgeted, this is what's recommended. We're going to reduce it by a certain amount to this level. In some cases, it's based upon historical expenditure patterns. In other cases, it's a matter where people may be asking for something above and beyond in a certain year, and we're looking at removing those things. But that's just for your information to know where these reductions are coming from since we started the process. And again, this is something is going to be presented to you next Tuesday evening. I anticipate Rob and Brenda that we may want to try to have a meeting at some point Monday.
Okay.
And I hope, I'm going to gather that's probably 5:30.
Sure.
5:30 works for me.
Okay. And that'll give us time to get all the final pieces in, and hopefully have them done by Monday. But again, it's going to be a budget that, as we always do, we try to adequately and appropriately fund our programming for our students and staff, but be fiscally responsible to our community. And if there was ever a time to be fiscally responsible to a community, it's right now. And I know you all understand that. I know our administrators understand it, our staff members understand it. We don't have to like it, but I think we have to understand it. And I appreciate their efforts in helping us move this budget in the right direction.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Do we have any further questions, Mr. Marcosian?
No further questions from the Zoom Q&A or email. I did, since there were so few questions, I cast a slightly wider net and looked at the Facebook comments for this meeting, and there was one question there from Gwen Diffin-Clark asking about the leadership team, if it includes any school board members.
So, leadership team is composed of all of our building principals and directors of our major departments. In some districts, it's referred to as an administrative team. That is a team that meets with me every 2 weeks, in some cases every week. Since the closure, it's been every week. They work directly with their staff. They bring concerns, questions from their staff. They take information back to their staff. It's a group that advises and serves as a conduit between our staff members and our administrative team. And much like with the document you received this evening with the remote learning plan, it's a recommendation through all those people working together through this leadership team, recommending it to you folks. But no, there's no board member on it.
Thanks, Dan.
There may be confusion in that there's also a leadership team of the school board, which happens to be the chair and the vice chair. So there are actually two teams there, so. Okay. Any further business? Well, I guess we're going to adjourn. So,
I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
A second.
Oh, hold it. I'm as a matter of point, I'm going to stop you because this is a workshop.
That's
we don't have to
Discussion
adjourn.
only. There's no action taken. So
That's true.
you can all agree to adjourn.
Okay, good evening.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. Stay safe.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
everyone. Thanks to everyone who tuned in.
Thank you.